My name is Jessica Betterly. I'm the product manager for Financials and Financials Lite. If my handy assistant, Brooke, could you go ahead and start the recording?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to assume she's, yep, perfect. There you go. All right, as I go through the presentation, if you would put your questions into the chat window, Brooke will be monitoring that, and I'll be stopping periodically for questions to review or to give you a chance to ask on the information we're covering. So please feel free to type any question you've got, and let's go ahead and get started. So extended fields. Extended fields are a feature that you have in OneNFP Financials and Financials Lite. So all of our clients, Financials clients, have the product. They allow you to store information on certain records in addition to the fields that are on that record. So for example, on a vendor, if you have certain information you would like to store about vendors and there isn't already a field for that, you can create a field for it. And that's an extended field. Where you have this available in the software are bank accounts, fixed assets, funds, GL accounts, vendors and the vendor bank account, and customers and the customer bank account. So let's get started with creating one. First place to start. So extended fields are organized into categories. So the first thing you need to do, so if you search on extended fields, you're going to see a number of things listed here. These all link to the same area. It's just that with our menu structure, it appears several times in the menu in different areas of the software, but these are all the same things. So you can click on any of these, this one being the one thing that is different. You can see the icon over here. That's actually a report that would give you a list of your extended fields. So let's start with categories. So the way extended fields are organized, they're first organized by the table, which is the master record, that list of records that I mentioned. And then they're organized into categories. So you can see here I have extended fields for vendors and extended fields for funds. And within the ones for funds, I've organized them into two separate categories. So if I want to create another category, let's create one for bank accounts. And gosh, let's just call it information. So now that I have that category, I can go and create extended fields for bank accounts, but I have to have the category first. So let's go from the extended field categories. I could do a search again. I can also just click there to go to my list of extended fields. Whoops, no, that's not my list. Let's close that. Come on, search. So back to my list. Now I'm going to go, here's my list of extended fields. Here we go. So this is showing all the extended fields I have across all of my categories. You can see the categories that I created. I don't have any extended field created for bank accounts. That's not why we're not seeing it listed there. But you can see I have one for vendors to track minority, women, and disabled businesses. And for funds, I have contact information and I have a reporting date. Because of the way I've structured this training, I want to use what's already on the fund. So the new field I'm going to create is going to go into the reporting category rather than using the one I just created. I just wanted to mention that because normally I would want that to flow all the way, but I want to be able to leverage data that's already on the record. So let's create a new extended field. Table name is going to be fund. I do want to mention when you look up on these lists of tables, most of you know we're built on Dynamics NAV and then built even further onto Serenic Navigator. So there are several tables that we actually don't support, several areas of the software that OneNFP Financials doesn't use. So there are going to be tables in this list that you won't recognize. You really want to stick to the ones that I mentioned: bank account, fixed asset, fund, GL account, vendor and vendor bank account, and customer bank account. So we're going to go ahead and create this extended field for fund. I'm going to pick my category code, and I want to put this one in reporting. Okay, so now I've grouped it. Now I can get into the heart of creating the actual field. This field I'm going to create, I've got a field in reporting for tracking when my report date is, what my due date is for reporting back to my funder. Now I'm going to create a field for who's responsible for that report. So let's call it, if I can actually spell, there we go. All right, so I've got a couple fields for description. It's got to have a unique code, and that's about 10 characters. Now we get into value source. Most of the time, what you're going to pick is user-defined. You have the option to do a lookup to another table, so when you're defining the extended field on the record, it could look up to the list of customers. So you might create a field called funder that looks to your list of customers for the values. That's not a common usage of the extended fields. Most of the time you're going to pick user-defined. These are the different types of information you can store, and when we get into reporting with JET reports, you're going to want to make sure you know what this type that you've selected is. In this case, we're going to pick text, and I can do some restriction on the length of that field if I would like to. I'm going to leave it as it is. The next thing I want to do, though, is I want to pick, when I'm adding this to a fund, I want to pick from a specific list of people responsible. What that gives me, instead of having, what I could have is just free-form text to enter whatever I want every single time I add this extended field to a fund record. But it helps with the analysis feature if it's a specific list. So I'm going to create a specific list. Click user-defined extended field values. So this is the list of values that are going to be available for this extended field. So let's see. Sue Smith. And and Joe James. And let's say Sue is the default. Okay, you don't have to pick a default, but one of the options that you have is this auto insert on new records. So if I check that, every time I create a new fund, the software will automatically add this extended field to that fund with the value of Sue. So automatically Sue is the person responsible. So this just tells us that we have fields defined. That was the list we created here. This existing table section is only applicable if you were picking an existing table here under value source. So again, very rarely are you going to use that. And this entries exist is just informational to let you know if it has been, this extended field has been added to any of the records. In this case, any funds. So that's actually creating the extended field. I'm going to stop here for a quick second to see if there are any questions.
I don't see any at this time.
Okay. All right, looks good. All right, so the next step, this is completely optional, depends on what you're using, what the data is like. There is an option here under Actions called Mass Update. This will add the extended field with one specific value to all of your records. There are some options for filtering out based on if the field is already there. So for example, every year you may update a certain value, but it's going to give the same value to all the records. So it's something you might use judiciously. In my case for reporting, I'm going to go ahead and use it because then I can have a value for showing some of the analysis features. So I'm going to pick, let's go ahead and say Sue. And There is an option here, test update. This, you can see how it would work and make sure that it hit just what you expected it to. I'm just going to go ahead and make this a live update. So this could be useful if you've got a value that is on the majority of your records. You could then apply it to all of them and then go back and change just the ones that are different. So here in the report you can see it's giving me a list of all the funds that have been updated. And now entries exist tells me yes, because the extended field now appears on fund records. So that's creating the actual extended field. If we take a look at some of the others that we have here, let's take a look at this for a second. Report date. This one does not have any extended fields defined because it's free entry, but the value type is date, so it's going to require a date when I'm entering the information. If I try and enter other kinds of data, it won't take it, it won't accept it, and it'll give me a message back saying that that's not allowed. So that's creating the fund, or the extended field. So let's go and take a look at our funds for a second. All right. Sorry, GoToMeeting sometimes interferes with my connection. Come on. Yes, it is taking longer than usual. There we go. All right, so if we're on a list of records, in our case funds, and you want to add or look at or change the extended field, all you have to do is click the button over here. And we're going to see, in this case, this Fund 210 only has two extended fields defined. We have the responsible that we just added with the mass update. And let's go ahead and change that from Sue to Joe. And we have what the due date for reporting. This effective date allows you to store multiple values. If we close this and go to, I think, Morrison Foundation, here we go. It's a longer grant. I've been reporting to them for a couple of years. We can see what last year's reporting date was with the effective date and this year's reporting date. So I can keep a history if I want. You can also see, as I did on the last one, you can just change the value if that's what you'd rather do. So once you have the information on the record, the next question is, what can you do with that? In some instances, just being able to store the information is going to be very helpful. But sometimes it's also helpful to be able to look at that information in a little wider scope. And that's what these two options up here, single level and multiple level analysis. We're going to start with single level. And the difference has to do with how many categories you can pick and choose from. So we're going to pick our table, which is going to be fund. So now we get a list of our funds, and we're going to pick our category, and I'm going to pick reporting. So I can see who's responsible and what the due date is for reporting. So if I want to have a list to keep an eye on so I've got two coming up in just the next couple of weeks, I can keep an eye on that and talk to Joe and Sue to make sure they're working on their reports. So that's the single level analysis. Multiple level analysis lets you actually have different categories. So let's pick fund again. And here I've got line and column I can mix and match. So if I want to, let's say, reporting, I'm going to pick reporting and responsible for my lines. And for my columns, let's say additional. I haven't tried this one, so this data may not come out. Now let's go with what I've tried. That's probably smarter when I'm doing a presentation to real people. but I could pick additional. It really depends on what the data's like and how you want to crisscross it. So let's do report date. This is going to give us basically the same information, and I can see that based on due date, Sue has 3, Joe has 1. So that's going to give you a matrix of intersection for the information that you have available in the fund and cross those. Let's go ahead and try additional. Let's see if I can embarrass myself in public. It's always good. Good for the ego. Let's see. So we can see I've got 3 different fields included in the category additional, contact, contact email, and funder, and it looks like I only have a couple of funds that have those values, and they all have Sue responsible, so I don't think narrowing the field down is going to make much of a difference. But that's multiple analysis. It's useful, again, if you've got, particularly when you've got more than one category with extended fields. But the more extended fields you have, multiple level analysis is going to give you more of a matrix intersection, whereas single level analysis is going to give you that view by the list of records, in our case the list of funds, versus the fields we pick. So that's the first level of looking at the data within the software. So I'm going to stop for a quick second, see if there are any questions, and let you type while I take a quick drink.
Okay, Jess, looks like we do have a question.
Okay.
It says, is the example, it's counting the field entries, can there be sums or other values selected in this multiple level analysis?
In the multiple level analysis, it's just going to do a count of records, of how many records intersect those combinations of the column value and the field value, or the row value. When we get to jet reports, you would probably be able to take the information and from that create a calculation that's summed. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. All right. We good, Brooke?
Yep.
Yep. All right. All right, so let's go to the next step of reporting within the software. There is, I think I pointed out to you, there's a report that will list what your extended fields are. Other than that, the canned reports don't include the extended field information, basically because we can't predict what that information is going to be, and so it's very difficult to include that in a report. However, you can use it for filtering. So on my vendors, I think we looked at this when we were looking at the list of fields. I have an extended field for tracking minority, women, and disabled-owned businesses. So I have a list of values that I can pick from, whether it's minority, whatever the combination is of those values, so that I can track those businesses that I want to note I'm doing business with. What I can do then is use that value as a filter when I produce reports. So let's do a report, and now where is it? Which is the one I wanted to use? Oh, where'd I put that? Oh, I'm looking for one specific one. I love it when my notes must not be complete. Let's take a look. Vendor listing. I think that's what I'm looking for, and I'm not recognizing the right word. All right. Nope, that's not it. Sorry, folks. Obviously, I did not take my notes well. There it is, purchase list. Okay, so when you open up, there's a handful of reports. I believe they're listed in online help that will have here, as part of the filter options, extended fields. So if I put in my report date, and I'm going to filter my category. It's always going to ask for category. I want business. The extended field value is this minority, women, and disabled owned. And the filter, in this case, I want to produce this particular report only for values that have W for women-owned business. So now when this produced, it's going to look for those vendors that have that value for the extended field and give me just that subset of my vendors. So you can use it as a filter in some reports. So those are the canned reports. Again, our next step is going to be looking at how you use that data in a JET report. But let's pause here for a quick moment and see if we have any questions.
Nope, we don't have any questions yet.
Oh. Okay. All right. So then let's dive in to JET reports. All right, hang on just a second. Let me scroll my notes down so they're all ready and primed for me to review. All right. So JET lets you produce reports that are looking at tables within OneNFP financials. We've seen this on several of the brown bags, and hopefully you all are getting used to and using JET because I think it's a really great tool for you to use. Extended fields are stored in their own table, and that table is going to hold all the extended fields for all the different record types. So when, if you look at that table, it's going to have the table types, so vendor and fund and bank account and GL account, all those. It's going to have the category, it's going to have the field, it's going to have what record. So if we were thinking of it, we've got the example we had with fund. You'd have a table of fund and a category of reporting and a extended field code of responsible, and then you've got to have which record, so fund 100, and then what's the value on fund 100 would be Sue Smith. So there's a lot of information when you're looking at that. So let's see how we would build a report with that, with JET and Table Builder. All right, so we've been talking about funds, so I want to build on my fund, pick my fund table, and I want to, let's do this quick and easy, number and name, and let's do the from and to date restriction and include the actual balance. Now I'm going to add a table. When you search on extended field, there are going to be several different tables because the bits and pieces of creating an extended field have several tables. The one you want is extended field entry. That's the one that is holding what bits of information you have entered for a specific record. So we pick entry. All right, so what did I do? What did I do? That is not, oh, I'm looking at the sum fields. I don't want the sum fields. Okay, so here are the fields that are on the table. Now remember when we were creating the extended field and I mentioned that the value type was going to be important? This is where it's important because every line in this extended field entry table has a different cell for the type of information that you're bringing in. So what we want to do, let's say we're going to do the reporting date. That's a date value. That's the information we want to include in the record or in this report. If we were going to bring in the information on the responsible person, that was a text value, so we would check that. So it's important for you to know what fields you're bringing in and what that value type is so that you can bring the right piece of information from the table. All right, so some of the other things we want to do, we need to create a link so that the software knows what fund list record in the fund table connects to what records in the extended field entry table, and that's where we link the tables. So in this case, This is the list from the extended field entry table to fund. On the extended field, it is in almost every single case. There are some rare instances where it might be primary key value 2, but it's pretty much always going to be primary key value 1. That's where it's going to store, in our case, the fund number. So that is going to equal, here we're looking at the fields on the fund list, the number. So now the software, once it can make that connection when it's looking in the extended field entry table and it sees fund 100, it's making a connection to fund 100 in the list of funds. Okay, and let's also add a filter so we know exactly which extended field code we're drawing in. Okay, and we wanted reporting date. And I'm going to add one more. Remember we had an effective date. Effective date can get tricky, so we are only going to be able to bring in one value per fund. There's another way we're going to do the report where we can see all the values on the fund records, but we'll get to that in just a second. Coming at it from this direction where we're listing the funds, we're only going to be able to pick one value, which means the effective date, it's going to pick, the software is going to grab the first one it finds of this field. So I'm going to make this editable so I can change the effective date, and that might present a challenge for you if you wind up having a number of entries that have different effective dates. That might be a challenge if you try and build this report in this way. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So there's all the coding behind the scenes, how JET builds the report. Let's go ahead and refresh. And my report option showed up on my other monitor. So here's the effective date. If I wanted, I could change that. For right now, I'm going to leave it the way it is. And you can see, I don't know if you remember, on Morrison Foundation, we had 2 entries for reporting date. And the JET reports took the first one it found and stated 7/1/2014. If I rerun this and change my effective date to, say, after 01/01/15, oh, I don't get anything. So as I said, the effective date, if you have multiple values, it can just provide some challenges. I know these should have come in, so I must have done something wrong there. But so I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware. It can be very useful to have an effective date, but if you're using a JET report, it can also provide some challenges. So this is the first way of doing a JET report with extended fields. Because we picked fund as our primary table, our results are going to list all the funds in my system. And in that case, I can only have one extended field. The other way to approach this is, instead of picking fund, you pick extended field, and from extended field you connect to the fund table. So instead of picking fund and connecting to extended fields, you flip that. So let's see what that looks like. So because there are some pluses and minuses to doing that way. So this time, again, I'm picking the extended field entry because that's where my actual entries are for each record. And I'm going to pick date field and text value because I want both my report date and my responsible party. I want the information in each of those. And I'm going to, let's include the effective date. I want the extended field code. And let's pick primary key value so you can see it. And I think that's all I want on this. Let's see, do I want a filter? I think I do. So what we want is, let's say, where's category? Let's do category because what I want to do is exclude some of these other categories, business, which is on vendor, which would totally mess up my results, and additional. So let's just do reporting for right now. Now let's add a table, and we're going to add fund. And we need to make sure we've got that link. So now we're linking fund to extended field entry. So we're going to pick the fund number is equal to the primary key value. So now let's include the fund name and the actual. All right, so we're going to get the actual balance, and I think we're good. So let's see what that looks like. And refresh it. So now we're going to get an entry for every value that is on in the extended field entry, which means we're going to have multiple values by record. So with fund, we've got one. With fund 200, we've got a couple entries. So this is the downside. Now you can still produce a pivot table and work with your information that way. You can see, here's what I was talking about, of though when you look at the table, you want to make sure your value, the value type on the field, you're picking the right information, because in this line of the table, there's nothing in date value, but there's something in text value, versus this line of the table, which has something in date value and nothing in text value. So let's see, I'm really, really bad at doing pivot tables, but let's see if I can do one anyway, just for grins and the entertainment value of our audience today. So let's pick fund name and date value. So we can see Morrison has 2 dates. We could add in amount and how you do your pivot table, to the question we had previously, how you do your pivot table would then allow you to do some totaling based on the value in the extended field. So that's the presentation. Let's wrap it up with any additional questions. Are we looking good, Brooke?
Yep, we're still looking good. No
right.
questions.
All right. So we'll be posting this recording, as we usually do, to our YouTube channel. So if you want to refer to it as you continue to work and try out extended fields for yourself, and let the support at onenfp.com know if you've got any questions. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Jess.